Snow was drifting past my apartment window in slow circles while I sat on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper, ribbon, and the little stack of gifts I had picked out for my family. Christmas Eve had always been the one night I never questioned where I belong. I ironed the red sweater I planned to wear and folded it over the back of the couch. I had already turned down the invitation from the Young Innovators Christmas Gala hosted by the PELA Foundation because family always came first. I even laughed earlier today when a coworker asked if I was crazy to skip it. Maybe I was, but Christmas dinner at my dad's house was something I could still count on, or so I thought. I want to ask you too while you are settling in, what are you doing as you listen to this story tonight? Because for me, I was kneeling on my living room rug tying a silver bow when everything changed. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Dad's name lit up the screen. I wiped my hands on my jeans, still smiling from the smell of cinnamon candles burning in the kitchen. I picked it up. Christina, you do not need to come tonight. We talked about it. The whole family agreed. You are too dramatic for a peaceful holiday. His voice was low and heavy, the tone he used when he wanted a final word rather than a conversation. I froze with the ribbon still in my hand. I thought maybe I misheard him. Too dramatic. For Christmas dinner, a dinner I had never missed in my life. I managed to say, Dad, what are you talking about? But he cut me off with that sigh I knew too well. We want a quiet evening. You always turn things into something bigger than they need to be. It is better this way. A quiet evening. My brother Daniel had already posted a photo of the cranberry sauce he made for tonight. My sister Emma texted earlier asking what pie I was bringing. Mom sent a thumbs up to the family group chat. Everyone was going. Except me. A dull ache pushed up behind my ribs. All the moments that earned me the label dramatic hit me at once. The night I told Dad about my promotion, and he said I was exaggerating again. The evening I defended Emma when he snapped at her, and he told me I always had to stir trouble. Even years earlier, when I came home excited about a middle school science fair, and he told me not to make such a fuss. I sat there remembering all the ways my voice had been twisted into something loud or messy or wrong. I swallowed hard and forced my breath to steady. I understand. I hope you all have a nice Christmas. My voice came out smaller than I intended. When I ended the call, the silence in the room felt heavier than the winter air outside. I looked at the sweater draped over the couch. I looked at the pie cooling on the counter. I looked at the gifts lined up neatly with their name tags. All of it felt pointless in a way that made my throat sting. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a FaceTime call from Chloe. I answered, and her face filled the screen. Festive red lipstick and the sound of jazz music behind her. She was already at the gala. Where are you? Why aren't you here? She leaned close to her camera. And do you even know they are planning to honor you tonight? I blinked. What are you talking about? I told you I am staying home with my family. Chloe stared at me with the kind of disbelief that made me feel like a kid, caught in the wrong classroom. Christina, you turned down one of the biggest events in the city on the night. They want to recognize you. For what exactly? I looked around my silent apartment. For what, indeed? I told her what happened, and she fell quiet for a moment. Something soft and angry flickering in her expression. Then she said Christina got dressed. Come here, please. You deserve to be somewhere you matter. I pressed my palm against my chest, still feeling the sting of Dad's voice. I did not want to admit how deeply it hurt. I did not want to admit how little sense it made that the people I loved most were the first to shut the door on me. I drew in a deep breath. The air felt colder somehow, even inside the apartment. I thought of the gala invitation sitting unread in my email. I thought of all the nights I had fought to be taken seriously at work and all, the times I had swallowed words in my own home just to keep the peace. Finally, I said, Tonight, I guess I am going to the gala. Cole grinned so wide I could almost feel her relief through the screen. That is my girl. Hurry, I will meet you at the entrance. When the call ended, I stood up slowly. Snow was still falling outside, the kind of soft snowfall that made the world look gentler than it really was. I reached for my coat, removed the red sweater from the couch, and brushed the wrinkles out. My hands trembled, but not from the cold. I did not know it yet, but the moment I stepped out my door, I was walking straight into the night. That would change everything. And if you are still with me, stay close. This Christmas Eve is only just beginning. The snow was coming down harder by the time I pulled into downtown, fat flakes catching the light of the street lamps as I inched my little sedan toward the River Point Hotel. The lot was already packed, so I ended up circling twice before squeezing into a spot near the far end. When I stepped out, the air hit my face like a cold slap, sharp and wet, the kind of winter chill that seeped straight through layers. I glanced down at myself. Dark jeans, a simple black sweater, the only dressy coat I owned. Nice enough for a casual family dinner with Dad and my siblings. Not exactly the kind of thing people usually wear to a fancy leadership gala at a hotel that had its own pianist in the lobby. I almost got back in the car. Instead, I stood there for a moment, letting my breath fog in front of me while I stared at the glowing entrance. People in long coats and shimmer walked past, laughing, adjusting their scarves, the low buzz of excitement floating in the air. Every instinct in me said that I did not belong here, that I was about to walk into the wrong room, like a kid who had wandered off. On the first day of school, I thought about the phone call from my dad. The words, "too dramatic for a peaceful holiday," repeated in my head like a mean little song, and under the ache and humiliation, there was this thin line of anger, quiet but steady. My hands were shaking, but I pushed my shoulders back, locked the car, and walked toward the hotel doors. Warmth rushed over me as soon as I stepped inside. The lobby was all polished wood and soft golden lamps. A huge Christmas tree rose from the center, covered in white lights and glass ornaments that looked like they cost more than my entire living room. To the left, an event sign on an easel read in looping script, "Young Innovators Christmas Gala." Hosted by Pela Foundation, with a little note underneath that said, "Live stream, sponsored by Northwest Community Media." There was a camera crew setting up near the hallway, adjusting tripods and checking mics. A tall man in a headset spoke into a walkie and nodded toward the ballroom doors. The sight made my stomach drop. So it was not just a fancy event. People at home would be able to watch too. I brushed snowflakes from my hair with my fingers and walked toward the registration table. Two young women in matching emerald dresses greeted guests, handed out name badges and drink tickets, and pointed them toward the ballroom. One of them looked up at me with a bright, professional smile. "Name?" she asked. "Christina Moore," I said, suddenly aware of how damp my hair felt at the roots. I was invited by Pela. She scrolled through a tablet, then nodded. "You are on the list. Welcome." She handed me a badge with my name printed in clean black letters and the words Harborline Technologies underneath. Then she added, "They are already rolling the live stream, so just a heads up, there are cameras inside." I thanked her, clipped the badge to my sweater, and followed the sound of music down the hall. The ballroom doors were propped open. Inside, dozens of round tables draped in white linens filled the room, each one topped with flickering candles and little arrangements of evergreen and red berries. A string quartet played near the front, their music weaving through the low hum of conversation. The lighting was soft and warm and flattering, the kind photographers love, the kind that made the whole scene feel like a movie set. I hesitated just inside the doorway as I took it all in. Most of the women wore cocktail dresses and sparkly earrings. Men in tailored suits were checking their phones or shaking hands. I tugged at the hem of my sweater, feeling like I had shown up for a holiday potluck while everyone else had gotten the memo about a black tie dress code. Still, no one stared. A few people glanced my way, but their expressions were curious, not judgmental. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Maybe I did not look as out of place as I felt. Or maybe this was one of those rare rooms where what you wore mattered less than what you had to say. I heard my name before I saw her. "There you are." Chloe came weaving between two tables, moving quickly in heels that would have sent me straight to urgent care. Her hair was pinned up, a few curls falling around her face. She looked perfect in a deep green dress that matched the event staff, but the grin she gave me was pure, familiar Chloe. She wrapped me in a quick hug that smelled like vanilla and hairspray. "I did not think you were actually going to do it," she said, leaning back to look at me. "I am so proud of you right now. I might cry and ruin my mascara." I laughed, a thin, fragile sound. "Do not cry," I told her, then lowered my voice. I feel underdressed. She gave me a head-to-toe scan and shook her head. You look like someone who belongs here, which is more than I can say for half the people reading off buzzwords all night. Come on, I want you to meet someone. She steered me between tables toward the front of the room where a small group had gathered near the stage. 2 large screens flanked the stage, both showing the PELA logo. A countdown timer in the corner ticking toward the start of the formal program. A camera crew was testing angles, the red light blinking patiently. A woman stood near the edge of the stage, talking to someone in a navy suit. She was in her early 50s, with short, perfectly cut silver hair and the kind of confidence that made the people around her lean in. When she turned, Chloe touched my arm. That is Diane, she murmured. Diane Harper. She runs PELA. She wanted to meet you. My stomach fluttered again. It was one thing to show up. It was another to be seen. Chloe stepped forward first, all easy charm. Diane, this is the friend I told you about, the one from Harbor Line. Diane turned her full attention to me. Her eyes were a sharp, thoughtful blue, the kind that seemed to take in more than you said. She reached out a hand, and I shook it. Hope my palm was not as clammy as it felt. So this is Christina, she said, her tone warm. I have read about your work. I am glad you decided to come tonight. For a second, I thought she had me confused with someone else. I am just a product director, I started, but my voice trailed off when she smiled. Just a product director whose last release boosted adoption across the entire West Coast market, she replied. People talk. The story going around is that Harbor Line would still be stuck in the last decade if you had not pushed for that new platform. I could feel my face heating. I looked down at my badge as if it might answer for me. I just did my job, I said, because that was the line I'd been trained to offer. The safe way to deflect attention. Diane chuckled softly. You know, every time I hear someone say that, it is usually about a woman who has carried 3 times her weight in silence. She touched my arm lightly. We are recognizing people like you tonight, innovators. People who shake things up in ways that actually help. Something in my chest shifted, like a locked door nudged open just a few inches. At home, in that small house with the old couch and the familiar tension, I was the difficult one, the troublemaker, the dramatic daughter who could not leave things alone. Here, in this room, those same traits were being described as leadership. Over Diane's shoulder, I caught a glimpse of a profile I recognized from work. Dark hair, strong jaw, the habit of standing with one hand in a pocket, like he was posing for a magazine cover he had not been invited to. Jason Miller. He was talking to a cluster of people from the local tech scene, his badge marked with the name of another company now. Different logo, same cocky tilt of the head. I remembered the meeting where he had presented my ideas as if they were his. The way my boss had clapped him on the back after and told him he was going places. The email he sent me after that, which said, team effort, as if that made it less of a theft. My stomach clenched. It figured he would be here. People who knew how to talk about success always found their way into rooms like this. People who quietly did the work were usually somewhere in the back refilling coffee. Chloe followed my gaze and made a face. I forgot to warn you, she muttered. I saw him come in earlier. It is fine, I said, even though it was not. I am not here because of him. Diane glanced between us, clearly picking up on the shift in the air, but she let it go. Instead, she said, the program is starting in a few minutes. Find a good seat. And Christina, I really am glad you are here tonight. She moved away to talk to someone from the board. Chloe looped her arm through mine and steered me toward a table near the middle of the room. We slid into 2 empty chairs just as the lights dimmed slightly, and the string quartet softened their music. A man in a charcoal suit walked up to the podium and welcomed everyone to the annual gala. He talked about young leaders, about innovation and community. On the screens, the camera cut between his face and a wide shot of the room. The live stream counter glowed faintly in the corner. I tried to focus on his words, but my mind kept flicking between the taste of rejection from earlier and the warmth of Diane's praise. It felt surreal that in the span of a few hours, I had gone from being told I was too dramatic for my own family's dinner to being told that shaking things up was valuable. When the first honoree was called to the stage, the room burst into applause. A young woman who had started a nonprofit for girls in STEM walked up, accepted her plaque, and spoke about growing up in a small town where no one understood why she loved computers. She talked about rejection, about pushing on anyway. I felt something in her words settle into me like a familiar song. There were 2 more recognitions after that. A man who had developed a new app for local clinics. A teacher who had rebuilt a robotics program at an underfunded high school. Each story was about someone who had refused to accept things as they were. Each story sounded like it came from a place of being told no more times than they could count. I did not see it coming when the host looked down at his list, then back up at the room, and said my name. Our next guest is someone whose work has quietly changed the way a lot of us move through the world without us even knowing her name. China Moore from Harborline Technologies. Would you join us for a few words? My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the edge of the plate. Chloe grabbed my arm. I swear I did not know they were going to do that, she whispered, but her eyes were shining. I shook my head, heart thudding. I am not prepared. I do not have anything written. She squeezed my arm a little tighter. Then just tell the truth. That is all they need from you. The applause was rising. Polite at first, then more insistent as people turned to look around the room for me. The camera near the stage swung out, searching. On the screens, I saw a wide shot of the crowd. Then the image zoomed in on my table, catching me in that split second where I looked like a deer in headlights. I could feel the heat rising under my skin. Part of me wanted to slide under the table and disappear. Another part, the part that had pushed through one closed door after another to get where I was, knew that if I ran now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Slowly, with my legs not entirely steady beneath me, I pushed my chair back and stood up. The applause swelled. The host smiled from the stage. Somewhere along the side wall, the red light on the camera locked onto me. I took a breath that did not feel deep enough, smoothed my hands down the front of my sweater, and made myself walk toward the steps leading up to the stage, each step echoing louder than it should have in my own ears. I felt the weight of every step as I climbed onto the stage, my palm brushing the smooth wooden railing. The lights above me were blinding, a bright white wash that made the entire ballroom blur for a second. I blinked hard, trying to focus, but my vision kept swimming like I had stepped from one world into another. Without warning, my throat was already tightening, the way it sometimes did when I was put on the spot at work. I could hear the soft echo of my own heartbeat pulsing in my ears. The host extended a hand toward me with an encouraging smile, but I barely registered it. I stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it a little with trembling fingers, then let my hands fall to my sides. I tried to inhale deeply, but the breath got stuck halfway. The room seemed impossibly large from up there, faces stretched out in rows and rows, the glow of the screen behind me catching the edges of their silhouettes. The red light on the live stream camera blinked steadily, pointed directly at me. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I swallowed and tried again, but the words tangled with the knot in my chest. My voice finally pushed through, thin and shaky. I started by thanking the foundation, trying to string together the polite, predictable things that people say during events like this, but the sentence broke halfway, my breath catching. Somewhere on the right side of the room, just loud enough for me to hear, a man muttered to the person next to him, "She is nervous." That single comment hit me harder than it should have. It felt like a cold finger tracing down my spine. My hands began to tremble again, and the light above me seemed to flare even brighter. For a moment, I could not tell if my knees were locked or if I was about to collapse. I forced myself to look out over the audience, but that only made it worse. They were waiting, expecting something, watching me unravel in real time. A deep, sudden silence fell over everything inside me. Not calm. More like the frozen kind of silence that happens when a lake ices over. Glassy and brittle and dangerous. I took another breath, but it scraped like sandpaper going down. I felt the panic rising, the same old fear that I was not enough, that I was out of place, that I had been foolish to even come here. The same fear I had learned as a kid when Dad told me I made too much out of everything, and that girls did not need to try so hard in fields that were not meant for them. the same fear that followed me through every meeting where I had to prove I deserved to be in the room. For a moment, I thought I might walk off that stage. Just step aside, mumble an apology, disappear into the crowd, and pretend none of this ever happened. Then something caught my eye. In the first row, just a few seats off center, a little girl sat beside her mother. She was maybe 8 years old, with 2 messy braids and a sparkly headband. Her legs dangled above the floor, swinging back and forth. She had her chin resting on her hands, elbows on the table, her eyes fixed on me with this expression that was not pity or confusion. It was fascinating. Real, open, hopeful fascination, like she was waiting for me to say something important. I remembered being exactly her age, sitting in my childhood living room with a clunky old laptop that Dad said was a waste of money. I remembered telling him I wanted to build things, real things, programs, apps, anything that made life better. I remembered how he shook his head and said that those jobs were for men who could think in straight lines. He said girls were better suited for something gentler, something quieter. And when I pushed back, he called me dramatic. Standing on that stage now, feeling that small girl's eyes on me, that memory hit me with such clarity that my breath steadied for the first time all night. I lifted my gaze a little higher and found my voice again, small at first, but real. I said that growing up, I never imagined I would be standing on a stage like this because I was told early on that I did not belong in the world of technology. I said that for most of my life, I felt like I was pushing against walls that were built long before I got here. I talked about how being a woman in a field dominated by men meant learning to explain yourself twice as clearly, just to be heard half as much. The room grew incredibly still. I kept speaking. I talked about how many times I had been overlooked, not because I lacked the skill, but because someone else had the louder voice or the easier confidence. I talked about how being called dramatic became a label people used when they did not want to deal with the uncomfortable truth I happened to be pointing out. I talked about how silence was expected of me, how staying small kept the peace, and how exhausting it was to hold all of that in your chest and still show up every single day. I could feel my heartbeat slowing as I spoke, and the lights did not feel quite as blinding anymore. I pressed on. I mentioned the time a colleague at a previous company had taken my project idea and pitched it as his own during a leadership meeting. I did not name him. I did not need to. The details were soft enough to be polite, sharp enough to be understood. For a brief moment, I wondered if Jason was watching from somewhere in the back of the room. But it did not matter. This moment was mine. I looked out again and my voice grew stronger. I said that what people call dramatic is often just passion with nowhere to go. I said that sometimes the world benefits from people who refuse to shrink. I said that if I had listened to the voices telling me to stay quiet, I would never have carved the path that led me here tonight. There was not a sound in the entire room, not one clink of a fork or a whisper. Even the air felt different, like everyone was holding the same breath at the same time. I kept my eyes on that little girl in the front row. The hope on her face made something tighten in my chest in a way that was oddly tender. I realized I was not speaking to a crowd anymore. I was speaking to her, to the younger version of myself, to every woman who had ever sat in a meeting and watched someone else take credit for her work. To every person who had been told they were too much. I reached the last part of what I needed to say, and the words fell into place naturally, as if they had been living in me for years, just waiting for a door to open. I said that if someone sees your strength and calls it trouble, that is their fear talking, not your worth. And I said that even when it feels like your voice shakes, it is still your voice. No one can take that from you. When I finished, there was a heartbeat of silence that felt like the entire room had inhaled at once. Then the applause started. It began as a few claps near the front, then grew. It spread like a wave, rising and echoing off the high ceiling. People stood, tables shook, voices called out in encouragement. I heard someone shout yes from the left side of the room, and someone else say that is what we need to hear more of. The screens showed the live stream chat pouring in with messages. I could not read them clearly from the stage, but I could see the stream of comments flying faster and faster. a rush of support and excitement. My breath caught in my throat again, but for a very different reason this time. I had expected polite applause, maybe a few nods. Not this. Not people standing up like they were watching something brave or meaningful. Not strangers cheering like my voice had cracked open something in them, too. I glanced toward the back of the room and saw Jason standing with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. But it did not matter. None of them mattered in that moment, except the little girl with the sparkly headband. She was clapping so hard her headband was slipping sideways, her face bright and proud like I had just given her a gift she had been waiting for. I felt something ease inside me, something steady and sure. The host stepped forward, waiting for the applause to die down. My hands were still shaking, but now they shook with adrenaline, with relief, with something like joy. I stepped back from the microphone, turned slightly toward the audience, and the light softened just enough for me to see the faces clearly. And for the first time all night, I let myself breathe without fighting for air. The applause was still going when I stepped off the stage, a physical wave of sound following me down the steps. My knees felt like they were made of water. I gripped the little edge of the handrail, more for balance than anything else, and then suddenly I was on the floor again, back at eye level with all the people who just moments ago had been a blur of faces. The host said something into the microphone behind me, thanking me, moving the program along. But his words floated in and out of my awareness like they were happening in another room. My ears were ringing. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Someone touched my elbow gently. When I turned, Chloe was there. Her eyes were bright and wet, and she had that look she got when she was about to give a pep talk or smack. Someone who deserved it. "That was incredible," she said, her voice still hushed but full of energy. "Chris, you just blew the roof off this room." I let out a shaky little laugh. "I honestly do not even remember half of what I said," I admitted. "My mouth is so dry I might turn to dust right now." She pressed a champagne flute into my hand. "Drink this," she said, grinning. "Slowly, though. We are not trying to trend underdrunk at the podium tonight." I took a sip, the bubbles stinging my tongue, and finally started to feel my body again. We watched as the next segment of the program began, but conversations around us were still alive with what had just happened. The woman on my left leaned in to tell me her daughter worked in tech and needed to hear exactly what I had just said. Someone on my right mentioned a niece who kept getting overlooked at her company. Little stories spilled out like people had been holding them in too long. Up front, the host introduced a video montage, and the lights dimmed lower. The string quartet began a soft tune again. It gave people an excuse to talk quietly at their tables, to move to check their phones. Chloe pulled her own phone out, then frowned. "You probably should see this," she said. She angled the screen toward me. The Pela Foundation had a YouTube channel for the event, and the gala livestream was pinned at the top. A simple title sat above it, Young Innovators Christmas Gala, with a little red box that said live earlier, now showing the replay. Underneath, in smaller text, I could see white numbers slowly ticking upward as more views rolled in. "Look at the comments," she said. People were posting rapid little lines. "That speech, I needed that. And I am crying. She just told my whole story, and my daughter is watching, and I am so grateful." There were a few remarks from men, too, everything from respectful to openly moved. I stared at it for a moment, numb. "This is just the gala crowd," I said, trying to sound reasonable. "People are being polite." Chloe snorted softly. "No, that is the thing. They push this stream to their entire network. Founders, investors, journalists. Pela has been around longer than some of these new apps. People tune into this every year. This is not just a room reacting. The whole regional startup scene is watching." My stomach tightened and flipped at the same time. I had known they were filming, but I had thought of it like archive footage, something that might sit on a website somewhere. Now I pictured my face blown up on screens in living rooms, on laptops, on phones lying beside couches and kitchen tables, all across the city and beyond. My own phone buzzed in the pocket of my sweater. Then again. It was like it suddenly remembered it had work to do. I pulled it out. The screen was a blur of notifications. Text messages, email alerts, LinkedIn pings. People I had not heard from since college. Coworkers. A neighbor. A woman I had met one time at a conference 3 years earlier. I opened one message at random. A former colleague wrote, "I am watching you at the gala right now. I had no idea you were speaking. I just wanted to say thank you. You said what so many of us could not." Another said, "My 16-year-old is sitting here with me. She just whispered that she wants to be like you." My throat closed up for a moment. The idea that someone's teenage daughter, in some house, not unlike the one I grew up in, might be hearing something different from the messages I got at that age, hit me like a swell of ocean water. Then another notification came in, this one from a local online news outlet I followed. The header caught my eye. A young tech leader calls out bias with raw honesty at a holiday gala. Video clip inside. They had clipped my speech already. Chloe and I opened the link together. The article was short, but the embedded video showed the most intense parts of what I had said. They had cut out the hesitation, the shaky start. They had framed it like I had walked up there with complete intention and poured my heart out. Above the video, the little view counter showed a number that was already impressive for a local site, and beside it, a share count that was climbing. "Harborline is going to have a field day with this," Chloe murmured, half amused, half amazed. In a good way. I thought of my boss, of the company's Slack channels that were probably lighting up. I thought of all the times I had been told to tone things down in internal presentations. Now here I was, doing the opposite in front of hundreds of strangers, and it was somehow acceptable. Celebrated even. While we watched, the link got reposted by PELA's own social media accounts, then by a few of the judges from an accelerator program I recognized, then by a podcast host who covered women in leadership. Each repost meant a new wave of people seeing it, sharing it, commenting. It was surreal. All of these people were cheering for me, and yet the little corner of the world I had thought of as home had shut its gates. Door on me just hours earlier. That thought made me glance at my messages again, this time looking for my family's names. Nothing from Dad, nothing from Mom, nothing from Emma. Nothing from Daniel. I closed the messaging app and opened my social media feeds, almost, reflexively. The algorithm did what it does best and threw the gala livestream into my main feed as a recommended video. Right under it, that familiar little circle appeared, bright and colorful, shows that someone had recently posted a story. My sister's name sat right beneath it. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I tapped. Emma's story popped up. There was my dad's house. The living room I knew like the back of my hand, full of warm light and people. The old couch with the plaid throw blanket, the side table where Mom always set out the nutcracker decorations, the fake snow spray on the picture window. Daniel stood near the tree, holding a plate piled with ham and potatoes. Emma filmed the table, laden with food. There was a pan of green bean casserole, a bowl of mashed potatoes, the ham glistening on its platter, the pie I had baked sitting untouched on the counter. Everybody's voice off camera said, "Looks great this year," and my dad's laugh answered, "We kept it simple, peaceful." The word scraped at me. Peaceful. As if my absence was his idea of peace. Emma turned the camera toward the tree, where wrapped gifts were piled. I saw tags with all their names in Mom's careful handwriting, a few with my name too, small and tucked in the back. I watched the story twice. It lasted only a handful of seconds, but it burned itself into my eyes. They were there, together, carrying on the tradition as if I had never been part of it. Eating, laughing, celebrating, and somewhere on the television in the corner, muted and unnoticed, the gala live stream was playing. I could see the glow, the moving figures, but no one was looking. I backed out of the story, my chest tight. For a moment, I thought I might stand up and leave, just walk out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, into the snow, until the cold stole my thoughts away. Chloe must have sensed something shift because she squeezed my arm. "What is it?" she asked gently. "They still have not called, have they?" I shook my head. "No, but they are having a wonderful, peaceful dinner." Her jaw clenched. "I am going to say something rude," she whispered, then shook her head like she was trying to erase her own comment. Look at me. The fact that they cannot see what is in front of them does not erase what you did here tonight. It does not erase who you are. I nodded, but the words felt like they were bouncing off a wall inside me. It was possible to be proud of what had just happened and still feel like someone had stuck a hand inside your chest and squeezed. Before I could try to find something to say back, she glanced at her phone again. Her expression changed. "Chris," she said slowly, her eyes widening. "You need to see this right now." She tugged at my sleeve and pulled me up from the table. We slipped out of the ballroom through a side door into a quieter hallway, lined with framed black and white photographs of the city. The sounds of the gala muffled behind us. Out here it smelled faintly of cleaning solution and pine from the garland wrapped around the banister. She stopped under one of the wall lights and held her phone up between us. The clip of my speech that the local outlet had posted had been picked up by a bigger account, someone with a following I knew only vaguely, a business commentator who often posted about workplace culture. His caption read, "Young woman in tech drops the truth at a holiday gala. Watch this." Under the video, the view count was already climbing past 50,000. I stared at the number. 50,000. My own voice playing again and again in living rooms and on phones, reaching people I would never meet. Comments poured in under the post. I have never heard it said this clearly. This is my life in 2 minutes. My daughter needed to hear this today. And then one that made my breath hitch. I wish my family understood me like this. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass of a nearby window. I looked stunned and a little pale, but there was something else there too. A firmness in my eyes I did not always recognize in myself. I felt like I was standing on a bridge between two worlds. On one side, the familiar, painful role I had played for years. The difficult daughter, the one who rocked the boat. On the other side, this strange new role being offered to me tonight, a voice people were actually listening to, a face they were sharing with their own families. 50,000 views, Chloe said again. Softer this time. And it has not even been that long. I let myself lean back against the wall near the framed photographs, closing my eyes for a second. I thought of Dad, of him ladling gravy over potatoes, of him making a joke about finally having a quiet Christmas. I pictured someone at the dinner saying, "Hey, is that your daughter on the television?" I pictured his face tightening, his jaw clenching, the way it always did when reality did not line up with his expectations. A part of me still wished he would call, not to scold or control, but just to say he saw me. Just once. The hum of the hotel felt distant as I opened my eyes again. The snow outside the window had picked up, swirling in thick white currents around the streetlights. The city looked softer from up here, blurred and dreamlike. Inside my pocket, my own phone buzzed again, a steady rhythm now. Like a heartbeat I had not known was possible. I did not know it yet, but that little screen, those numbers climbing higher on videos I had not even watched all the way through, were about to pull my family, my work, and my entire sense of who I was into a collision I could not have imagined when I woke up that morning. I woke the next morning with the kind of groggy heaviness that follows a night full of emotion. For a moment, I did not know where I was. The ceiling looked unfamiliar in the dim winter light, and my body felt stiff from falling asleep in clothes that were not meant for sleeping. Then everything from the night before rushed back through me in one long wave. The stage, the applause. The video climbed toward numbers I could barely process. And then the memory of opening my sister's story and seeing my family sitting around Dad's dinner table, without a single empty chair waiting for me. I reached for my phone out of habit. The screen lit up so brightly it made me squint. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I sat up straighter. The missed call log was a wall of the same contact repeated over and over again. Dad, missed call. Dad, missed call. Dad, missed call. I scrolled slowly, counting without meaning to. There were 27 missed calls, all from him. Every one of them, sometime after midnight. My breath caught hard in my chest. I tapped on the voicemail icon and saw a cluster of audio messages waiting for me. My hand trembled slightly as I held the phone to my ear. The first voicemail started with a sharp intake of breath, the kind Dad always made when he was annoyed. Christina called me back. Immediately, the second voicemail played before I could decide if I wanted to listen to it.
What did you do?
His voice sounded tight and frantic, like he was trying not to yell but losing the battle. People are calling me asking why I was not at that event with you. Asking why you did not mention your own family. What am I supposed to say? The third voicemail was worse. I heard clattering in the background. Maybe dishes or someone setting down a tray. Then Dad's voice again, louder this time. Tell me where you are. Call me back. This is not funny. By the fourth voicemail, his anger had cracked into something else, something closer to panic. Hunnix from church are saying they saw you on their television. Why did you not tell me you were doing something like that? They asked why I was not there. I looked like an idiot. His voice dropped into a low grumble. I could not make out all the words, but I caught enough to know the panic was not because he was proud or worried. It was because people were talking. David had always cared more about that than anything else. The fifth voicemail was short. Call me. We need to talk. That was all. I lowered the phone to my lap, staring at the screen. 27 calls. I had spent years wishing he would listen to me, look at me without judgment, take pride in something I had done. And the moment he finally reached out with urgency, it was because his reputation felt threatened. A long sigh escaped me, the kind that came from deep in the ribs. I ran a hand through my hair, still tangled from sleep, and wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The morning light outside my window was gray and soft. The remnants of last night's snowfall pressed into uneven ridges along the street. Somewhere, a plow rumbled in the distance. Before I could decide what to do next, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message. Emma, my sister. The one who had posted the story of their quiet, peaceful dinner. Her message popped up in a little bubble. Dad is freaking out. Everyone at church is talking about you. But I saw your video. You looked amazing. Dad is losing his mind, but I am proud. I read it twice, 3 times. Her tone was always softer, less sharp than the rest of the family. But there was still a sting tucked inside those words. Dad is losing his mind. Poor of you. But delivering the message the way someone might deliver a weather report about a storm rolling in. I typed a reply, paused, deleted it. Typed another one, then erased that too. Nothing fit. Nothing felt right. So I locked the screen and set the phone face down on the duvet. I stood and walked to the kitchen, turning on the coffee maker. The familiar bubbling sound filled the quiet space. I held onto the counter with both hands and let the steam warm my face. I needed something to ground me, something normal, something simple. But the phone buzzed again behind me, a vibration against the wood that broke through everything. I closed my eyes. I knew who it would be. There was no question. When I turned the phone over, the screen glowed with the name that had shaped most of my life. Dad. The 28th call. For a moment, I just stared at it, frozen. My thumb hovered above the answer button. I imagined what he would say, the mixture of anger and embarrassment in his voice, the way he would twist what happened into something I had done wrong, something I had done to him. I knew this pattern. I had lived inside it my entire life. The second I answered, the same old script would unfold. His voice rising, mine shrinking, my words bending themselves into shapes that made him comfortable. His disappointment pressed tightly around me like a shrinking room. The phone kept vibrating, insistent, demanding, familiar. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the memory of that applause last night, the shockwave of it still echoing in my bones. Maybe it was the comments from strangers who saw me as someone worth hearing. Maybe it was the sight of my family eating dinner without me, like I was an afterthought they had removed from the equation to keep the holiday calm. Or maybe it was something simpler. Maybe I was just tired of being the one to fold first. The phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed felt thick, expectant. I set the phone down again, face up this time. The screen faded to black. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass. I barely recognized the woman looking back. She seemed steadier, tired, but steadier. like she knew something she had spent years trying to forget. I carried my coffee to the couch and sat down, pulling the blanket around my legs. Every muscle in my body felt heavy, but in that heaviness was a strange, new calm. The phone buzzed again. A text this time. Emma again. Dad wants you to go to church with him tomorrow so he can explain everything. He said people are asking why you did not invite him or tell him about the event. A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Explain everything. That was always his way of saying, control the story before anyone else did. I typed back, I am not going. Before the bubbles even appeared to show she was typing, my phone began ringing again. Dad. Again. Call number 29. I let it ring. I let it ring until it faded into silence. I sat there with my coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the snow outside my window while the phone lay beside me like a small, silent animal waiting to come alive again. I knew this was not over. I knew that walking away, even for a moment, would shake the entire foundation of what he expected from me. And I also knew he would not stop. The phone buzzed a minute later with another voicemail. I did not open it. Not yet. My heart pounded slowly, like it was adjusting to a brand new rhythm, one I had never allowed myself to hear. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady. The world felt quiet in a way it rarely did, and for the first time in a very long time, I let the quiet stay. I sat there on the couch, coffee cooling in my hands, the blanket bunched around my legs, and I just listened to nothing. No television humming in the background, no Christmas music, no voices arguing in the next room, just the soft tick of the heater vent and the distant hiss of car tires on slushy streets somewhere below my apartment window. In that quiet, memories started to move, slow at first, then faster, like they had just been waiting behind a door I kept closed. I saw myself at 8 years old, sitting at the old kitchen table in Dad's house with a science kit spread out in front of me. It had been a birthday present from a teacher, one of those little plastic sets with test tubes and food color packets and instructions for how to make safe experiments. I had lined everything up carefully, something magical. Dad came in from work, smelling like cold air and gasoline, setting his keys down with that familiar clink. I told him I wanted to be a scientist. I still remember how the words felt in my mouth, bright and brave. He frowned and said something like, "That stuff is fine to play with, but real science is for people who can think that way. Men, mostly. You might want to focus on something more practical." I had not understood all of what he meant then, but I heard what mattered. Not for you. Not yours. The memory shifted, and I was 13, sitting in the guidance counselor's office at school, hearing that I had been offered a scholarship to a summer program in science and technology. The counselor was smiling. My mom looked a little stunned, and Dad sat with his arms crossed, expression closed. On the drive home, I watched the houses slide past the car window while he told me that girls who spent too much time on computers ended up lonely. He said I should be thinking about more realistic things, like stable jobs, teaching or nursing, something that would fit better with family life one day. When I tried to explain that the program was a big deal, that scholarships like that did not just fall out of the sky, he shook his head and told me I was making too much out of it. You get an opportunity, and suddenly you think you are a genius, he said. It is just a camp. Do not be so dramatic. That word again, dramatic. He had spat it out like an accusation. Mom stared out the window. No one said anything else on the ride home. The quiet in my apartment deepened as the familiar ache stirred inside my chest. I took another sip of my coffee, now lukewarm, and kept following the trail of memories I usually tried to avoid. I saw myself at 24, sitting in a corporate cafeteria with a plastic badge clipped to my blazer, telling my parents over the phone that I had landed my first product manager role. My voice was shaking with excitement. It was not just a job. It was in a field I had worked like crazy to break into. Late nights, extra courses, side projects, all of it is finally paying off. David listened, then said, "Well, they must have been short-staffed. Sometimes you just get lucky." Lucky, as if the hours and years and effort did not count. because he had not approved. The path. I leaned my head back against the couch cushion, eyes on the ceiling, and let the most painful memory of all rise to the surface. Emma was 16, the night everything boiled over. I was already out of college, back at home for a while, working my first real job. Mom had made chicken and rice for dinner, and we were all sitting around the table. Emma mentioned wanting to apply to an after-school program focused on coding and robotics. Her eyes lit up as she talked about the flyer she had brought home. I recognized that look. It was the same one I used to have whenever I found something that made my brain hum. Dad barely let her finish. He said it sounded like a waste of time. He told her she should be focusing on more realistic goals, that she was not cut out for all that math and tech stuff. When she tried to defend herself, he raised his voice and told her to drop it. His fork clinked hard against his plate. Something in me snapped. Maybe it had been snapping in small pieces for years, but that night, it finally broke loud enough to be heard. I told him he did not get to decide what we were capable of. I reminded him how many times he had told me to stay in my lane, how often he had rolled his eyes when I talked about my work. I said it was wrong to crush Emma's interest just because it did not fit into his picture of what daughters should be. The room went very still. Then the shouting started. Dad turned his anger on me, called me disrespectful, accused me of trying to turn Emma against him. He said I was blowing things out of proportion. That word came back again. Dramatic. He said I had been that way since I was little, always pushing, always ruining a simple evening. Mom told me to calm down. Emma stared at her plate, tears sliding down her cheeks. Daniel, my brother, told me I was making things worse, that we could have talked about it later, that I did not have to turn it into a big scene. By the end of the night, somehow I was the problem. Not the things he had said, not the way he shut down my sister's budding dreams. Me, the one who spoke up. Dad did not talk to me for a week after that. When he finally did, it was to tell me that if I could not keep from stirring up drama, I should find my own place. So I did. I moved into a small studio across town. I built my life around work and friends and the bits of peace I could find away from that house. But the label stuck. Dramatic. Too much. Too loud. It followed me into situations where I tried to advocate for myself and then felt guilty about it. It made me question my reactions even when I knew I had every right to feel the way I did. Greetings there on my couch that winter morning, phone heavy beside me. Those old wounds felt as fresh as if they had happened last week. The ache in my chest was not just from last night's dinner I had missed. It was from years of being told that my perspective was a problem to be managed. I looked at the phone again and thought about calling Dad back. Part of me still wanted to. That part belonged to the girl who used to bring report cards home and wait for a rare smile of approval. To the young woman who hoped that if she achieved enough, he might finally see her as something other than noisy and inconvenient. But another part of me, the part that had stood on that stage and spoken the truth without apology, knew exactly how the call would go. He would demand an explanation. He would talk about how embarrassed he was at church. He would ask why I had not told him about the gala, why I had made him look foolish. Somehow, even this, even a night where I had simply shared my experience, would become something selfish in his eyes. I could almost hear the conversation playing out in advance. I knew my lines too well. He would raise his voice. I would shrink. I would soften my words to keep the peace. I would apologize for hurting his feelings, even if he never thought about mine. If I called him back now, I would fall right back into that script. Years of practice would take over. I would forget what it felt like to have my voice ring out strong in that ballroom. A wave of sadness washed through me, heavier than anger. I thought of little me at the kitchen table with the science kit, teenage me with the scholarship letter, and growing me with the first big promotion. In every scene, there was the same hope, the same tilt of my head as I looked toward him. Waiting. At some point, waiting had become a habit I did not know how to break. I picked up the phone slowly. The screen lit again, showing the notifications I had ignored. Voicemail from Dad. New message from Emma. A couple of emails from coworkers with subject lines like, "Saw you on the stream," and "You were amazing." I ignored all of it for a moment and opened my text thread with Dad. The last message from him, before last night, was a reminder about bringing dessert for Thanksgiving. Simple. practical, surface level. It struck me how rare it had been for us to talk about anything that mattered. Deep down, my thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I started typing without fully deciding what I wanted to say. Dad, I saw your calls. I think we both need to calm down. Let us talk another time. The words appeared on the screen in a neat little line. They looked reasonable. Adults. Like something a person might say when they were trying not to escalate a conflict. I stared at the text for a long moment. On the surface, it sounded like a compromise, but underneath, I could hear myself making room for his feelings yet again, framing the situation like we were both simply heated, like what had happened was just a misunderstanding between equals. The truth was, I was not heated anymore. I was hurt and tired and starting to see the pattern clearly for the first time. If I sent that message, I knew how it would go. He would take it as an opening. He would call again. He would push to handle everything quickly, on his terms. I would feel obligated to respond. The window I had just opened for myself, the space where my voice had started to sound like my own, would slam shut. My chest rose and fell. Once, twice, slowly. Then I hit the backspace key. The words disappeared, one letter at a time, until the screen was blank again. I sat there with the empty message box in front of me, the little blinking cursor waited, and for the first time, I let it wait, without rushing to fill the silence. I saw the empty message box blinking on my phone, waiting for whatever I might choose to say. And for once, I let it stay empty. I set the phone aside and let the room settle around me. My coffee had gone completely cold, but I did not get up to warm it. I just sat there, breathing in the quiet, letting my mind untangle itself. After a while, I finally stood, stretched the stiffness out of my back, and wandered over to my desk. My laptop waited there, the lid half open from the night before when I had checked a few messages from coworkers who caught the live stream. I pressed the power button, and the screen glowed to life. I was not prepared for what I saw. The homepage of a local Portland news site was open on the browser, a leftover tab from when I had searched for the gala last night. On the right-hand sidebar, under a section titled Trending This Morning, was a headline with a face I recognized instantly. Jason Miller. His headshot, his confident smirk. The headline read, Synertech executive discusses revolutionary new workflow model. My stomach tightened. I clicked the article. There he was, Jason, sitting in a chair during what looked like a video interview. He was leaning back like he owned the place, one hand gesturing as if he was the genius behind some brand new process. The article quoted him talking about innovations the company had implemented, the ones that had helped them stand out among competitors, methods to streamline coordination, approaches to increase team efficiency. He talked about it all like it had been his idea. The same ideas I had pitched in meetings, the same ones I had spent nights refining, the same structure I had built with my own work and tested during long, exhausting project cycles that he barely touched. The article did not mention my name. Not once. I felt heat rise in my face, spreading down my neck. It was not the kind of hot, explosive anger that made you want to yell. It was slower, deeper, the kind that settled into your chest like a heavy stone. That old sense of invisibility, of being erased, crept back into me in a way I had not felt in years. But then I scrolled further. Below the interview was a block of comments. The top one had hundreds of likes. Isn't this what that young woman talked about at the gala last night? Someone else wrote, wait, hold on. I watched her speech on the PELA live stream. She literally described doing this work. Why is he taking the credit? Another comment. Is Synertech really letting their female employees get sidelined like this? I sat back in my chair, stunned. People had connected the dots. Strangers, viewers, people I had never met. They were defending me without even knowing me. Just then, my phone buzzed on the desk. Not Dad this time. A different contact lit up the screen. Synertech. The main office line. I hesitated only a second before answering. Christina. It was the CEO's voice. Mark Talbot, usually calm and polished. Today, he sounded like a man who had been up since dawn. I watched your speech last night. He paused. It was powerful and honest. I swallowed hard. Thank you. I did not know what else to say. There is something we need to address, he continued. Clearly, people are talking, not just online. Clients are asking questions. We have a responsibility here. My pulse quickened. I waited for the familiar dread, the warning, the subtle pressure to stay quiet. Instead, he said, "We want to tell the truth, the real story, your story. What you built here deserves recognition." I blinked, unsure I had heard him correctly. He kept talking. "We want you to lead our DEI initiative this year, the Diversity and Equity Program. We need leaders who actually understand what it feels like to fight for visibility. You would be the face of that effort." For a second, I could not breathe. All the years I had hoped my work might be acknowledged, all the times the credit slipped into someone else's hands, all the moments I had swallowed disappointment because I did not want anyone to call me dramatic. Now someone in authority was looking right at the truth. I heard myself ask, "Why me?" He exhaled. "Because you earned it. Because your work has shaped this place more than many people realize. And because last night, you reminded us what leadership looks like." My throat tightened. I felt something uncoil inside me, something that had been knotted for years. I thanked him quietly, still stunned. "We will schedule a meeting after the holidays. Rest. Take the time you need." When I hung up, I just stared at my phone, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me again. But this silence felt different, like it had space in it, like I had space in it. I reopened my laptop to close the browser, but a new window popped up. My email inbox updated with a ping. Subject line, "Opportunity at Tech North." I blinked hard. Tech North? The biggest tech company in the Northwest? A place that had applicants lined up across the country. I clicked the message. It was short, but warm. "China, we saw your talk last night and would love to speak with you after the holiday break. We believe your experience and leadership perspective align with the direction our organization is moving." Below was a direct contact number, a calendar link, and the signature of a senior recruiter. My hand covered my mouth before I even realized it. My eyes stung a little. Not with sadness this time, but with something like disbelief, like relief. All the years of fighting quietly, all the moments of being told I was too much, all the nights when I sat at this same desk wondering what the point of pushing so hard was. And here was the answer, not from Dad, not from my family, not from the people who had shut me out at Christmas dinner, from the world I had built for myself, the world I had earned. I leaned back, let my eyes close for a moment, and breathed in slowly. The air felt warmer now. Or maybe I felt stronger. It was difficult to tell the difference. When I opened my eyes again, the screen still glowed with the email invitation. Simple and clear and real. For the first time all morning, I let myself smile. A small one, but steady. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for me to reply. And for once, I did not rush to fill the silence. I just let myself look at it, feel it, understand that something inside me had shifted in a way that was not going back. Not this time. Somewhere across the room, my phone buzzed with another voicemail notification. Probably Dad. Probably the same arguments and demands waiting for me. But I did not reach for the phone. I sat there, watching the little red voicemail icon stare back at me like an accusing eye. Outside, the pale winter light had shifted, turning the snow on the rooftops the color of old pearls. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor turned on a vacuum. The low hum traveled faintly through the walls, reminding me that people were out there, going about ordinary days, while mine sat tilted off its axis. My laptop still glowed with the email from Tech North. The subject line felt like a hand reaching toward my future. But the weight of the past was buzzing in my pocket in the form of unanswered calls for my dad. I knew I could not avoid him forever. The ache in my chest grew deeper the longer I let it sit there. Avoidance had never really been my style anyway. If anything, my problem was that I ran toward conflict when everyone else ran away. It was part of what had earned me that dramatic label in the first place. The phone started buzzing again on the coffee table, rattling slightly against the wood. I looked over. Dad's name filled the screen. again. I stared at it as it rang once, twice, 3 times. My stomach tightened. The part of me that still felt like a child, the one who used to flinch at the sound of his footsteps when he was in a bad mood, wanted to let it go to voicemail again. To push this off until some mythical future day when I felt stronger or safer. But another part of me, the part that had stood on that stage and told the truth in front of a whole city, knew this was the moment everything inside me had been moving toward. I took a deep breath. My thumb slid across the screen. I answered. For a second, all I heard was noise, the clink of plates, silverware on dishes, chairs scraping lightly against the floor. It sounded like the aftermath of a big meal. I could picture it without trying. The dining room at my dad's house, the one I had sat in every Christmas for as long as I could remember. Leftover ham, reheated potatoes, the pie I had baked in the center, finally cut into, voice layered over each other in the background. Emma saying something I could not quite catch. Daniel's laugh, Mom's low murmur. Someone opened the fridge, a cabinet door shut. Life was going on in that house without me. The sound of it bled through my phone and into my living room like a ghost. Then Dad's voice cut through the noise, sharp and almost too loud in my ear. He said that I had caused a lot of trouble. He said people at church had been calling him all morning, asking why he had no idea his daughter was some kind of big shot. He said one of the elders asked how a man could not know what his own child was doing on a stage in front of the whole city. He sounded less like someone worried about me and more like someone who had just been backed into a corner. I listened, the phone pressed lightly to my ear, my eyes on the far wall. My heart pounded, but I stayed quiet. That alone felt like a miracle. The old me would have started explaining immediately, filling the air, trying to fix the story so he would not be so upset. He went on. He said it was embarrassing that he had to find out from other people. He said they were acting like he was a bad father. His voice wobbled slightly around that word. Bad. Then hardened again. He said I should have told him, that I had made him look foolish, that this whole thing should have been handled differently. At no point did he ask if I was all right. At no point did he say he had seen my talk and was proud. All the emotion in his voice was tied to how other people saw him. Something in me burned hot at that realization. Not the wild flare of anger I used to feel, the one that got me in trouble. A slower, steadier flame, the kind that lights up a dark room and reveals what has really been there all of it along. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised me. It was soft, but there was steel in it. I asked him if he cared more about how people were looking at him than about how he had treated me. There was a pause. I could almost see him blink, like he had not expected me to step out of my assigned role. In the background, someone laughed at something unrelated in that house across town, and the casual sound of it cut me in a way I did not let myself show in my tone. He did not answer my question. Not directly. Instead, he raised his voice a little and said we needed to sit down as a family and talk this out in person. He said I should come over. He said this was not a conversation to have on the phone. He wanted to control the environment, like always, bring me back into his territory, put me back in the chair at the end of the table where he could loom over me and set the terms. There it was again, the old script. He had not changed. The situation had, but he had not. For a second, my resolve wavered. Years of habit tugged at me. I could hear my internal voice whispering that maybe it would be easier to just go, to smooth things over, to be the one who kept the peace, even at my own expense. But then, another memory rose up. Me as a teenager, standing in that same dining room, heart pounding as I defended Emma, and paid for it with a week of cold silence. The way everyone had acted like I had ruined the night, instead of looking at what had been said to her. My chest tightened. I realized that if I walked back into that house now, without anything being different, I would be walking straight into the same trap I had crawled out of years ago. I took a breath. My hand shook just slightly where it held the phone, but my voice came out clear. I told him I was not coming over. There was a strange little silence on his end. I could hear his breathing, the clink of a fork hitting a plate in the background, someone adjusting a chair. He sounded completely thrown off his script. He tried again. He said that the family handled things face to face. He said I was overreacting. He said people get upset, words are said, then we move on. I let that sink in. To him, this was just another argument, another little storm we were supposed to pretend never happened once the skies cleared. It did not matter that this time the argument had happened with the whole city listening. It did not matter that I had been uninvited from the one night that was supposed to be about togetherness. To him, this was just another opportunity for me to bend. So I asked a different question. I asked him if he understood why what he had done hurt, not just last night, but all the years leading up to it. The way he dismissed my work, the way he had minimized every dream that did not fit his picture of what a daughter should be. The way he had used that word dramatic to shut me down whenever I spoke up. His answer was to call me sensitive. There it was, another old word. Sensitive, emotional. The cousins are dramatic. The quiet heat in my chest flared for a second, then steadied. I realized at that moment that I could not make him see something he refused to look at. I explained as calmly as I could that my boundaries had changed, that I loved my family, but I would not step back into a space where my voice was treated as a problem. I told him that walking into his house right now would mean accepting the same dynamics as before, and I could not do that anymore. He came back with the line I had heard my entire life, that I was making a big deal out of nothing, that I was blowing one decision, one conversation, into something bigger than it needed to be. For a brief second, the old doubt tried to push in. Maybe I am making too much out of this, that small, conditioned voice whispered. Maybe if I just calm down, maybe if I tell him it is all right, maybe if I carry a little more weight, we can be a family again. Then, just as quickly, another part of me spoke up, the part that had read comment after comment from strangers who felt seen by my words. The part that had watched a little girl in a sparkly headband clap like her. Life might be different because she heard me say the truth. The part that had received an email from a major company saying, "We see you," and from my own CEO saying, "We want to do right by you." Those voices were louder now than the one telling me to shrink. So I said the words that had been forming quietly in the back of my mind since I first saw my empty place at the Christmas table. I told him I needed time, that I was not ready to sit down at his table and pretend this had not happened. That I was not willing to go back to a version of myself who had to twist into knots to keep him comfortable. I said, as simply as I could, that I was not coming back into a situation where I would be treated the way I had always been treated. Not anymore. There was a long pause. This one felt different. He sounded less angry now, more confused, like someone who had walked into a room he thought he knew and found them furniture moved. He tried one more time. He said something about respect, about honoring parents, about how the family did not turn its back on each other over the misunderstandings. I let him finish. Then I told him that respecting him did not mean abandoning myself, that honoring my parents did not require me to sacrifice my own sense of worth. That family could be honest, or they could be comfortable, but they could not pretend forever and still be healthy. When the words left my mouth, I wondered if I had gone too far, but they were out now, floating in that small space between us. True, whether he accepted them or not. The background noise in his kitchen had quieted. No more clattering dishes. No more laughter. It was like the whole house was listening. Finally, my dad spoke again. His voice was lower, almost tired. He said that if I left things like this, people would think I was ungrateful, that I was too proud, that success had gone to my head. I felt my shoulders relax, strangely enough, because buried in that sentence was the admission he would not make directly: success. He had never used that word for me before. I did not point it out. I simply said that I could not control what other people thought, that I could only control what I allowed into my life. He made a frustrated sound, something between a scoff and a sigh. Then there was a rustling, as if he was shifting the phone in his hand. For a moment, I thought he might say something softer. Another time, another version of this conversation, he might have moved towards some kind of apology. But this was not that time. And he was not that version. He said we could talk later, when I was thinking more clearly, that he was done trying for now. I did not argue with that. My voice was steady when I said that I hoped one day he would really listen, not to what other people were saying, to what I was saying. There was no answer to that, just the faint sound of his breathing, then the flat, final click as he ended the call. I sat there with the phone still against my ear, listening to the silence on the line. Then I pulled it away and looked at the black screen. In the reflection, I saw my own face, tired, a little pale, but something in my eyes looked different, clearer, like a fog had lifted. The room around me felt the same couch, same coffee table, same winter light, but I knew that I had just stepped over some invisible threshold. There was no going back to the version of me who would have rushed to apologize, just to stop him from being uncomfortable. I set the phone down gently on the cushion beside me, my hand shaking a little with the release of adrenaline. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, somewhere in that other house across town, my family was probably cleaning up lunch. Maybe someone was still talking about the gala clip. Maybe someone had changed the subject to something easier. Here, in my own small space, I had finally said what I needed to say. I did not know what it would cost. Not yet, but for the first time, the price felt worth paying. The apartment felt unusually still after the call ended, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat there for a long time, letting the quiet settle into me, not fighting it the way I used to. Eventually I stood, stretched my shoulders, and felt the weight of what had just happened shift. Inside my chest, it did not disappear. It simply rearranged itself into something I could finally carry without collapsing. Over the next few days, I slipped back into my work routines, or rather, a new version of them. Meetings felt different now. People who had once brushed past me in hallways paused to say they had seen the gala video. Some said it quietly, as if it were a confession. Others said it with open admiration. One woman from accounting stopped me by the elevator and said, "I showed your speech to my daughter. She needed to hear someone say that out loud." I thanked her, still surprised each time someone recognized me. The world had not changed overnight, but the way people looked at me had. There was an ease in their eyes now, a respect I had not realized I had been starving for until it finally arrived. Tech North scheduled 3 exploratory calls with me. Nothing formal yet, just conversations. But even those felt surreal. Talking with leaders from a company I had admired for years without having to shrink myself or downplay what I had done. They listened. They asked thoughtful questions. They treated me like someone worth reaching for. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was standing on steady ground instead of tiptoeing on the edges of someone else's expectations. One afternoon, after a long strategy meeting, I exited the building to find Emma leaning against my car. She had her hands shoved in her coat pockets, and her breath came out in little, white clouds. She looked older somehow, or maybe I was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "Hey," she said, kicking lightly at a piece of ice on the pavement. "I hope this isn't a weird place to wait, but I needed to talk to you where nobody else was listening." I unlocked the car and motioned her inside. The heater blasted warm air around us. She sat with her arms wrapped tight around herself, staring straight ahead. I watched her, waiting. After a long moment, she said, "I saw the video 3 times, and I realized something." She swallowed hard. "You have stood up for all of us for years. And I never stood up for you. I never defended you. I never even told you how much I admired you." Her voice cracked. I turned toward her fully. She kept going. I was scared. God gets so loud. He gets so sure of himself, and it was easier to stay quiet than deal with the fallout. But that night, you defended me. When he told me I wasn't smart enough for robotics, I remember thinking you were the bravest person alive. I should have said something then. I should have thanked you years ago. I'm really sorry. Her words struck me in a place I had closed off for so long that it ached to feel it open again. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. We sat like that for a few seconds, our breath mixing with the warmth from the vents. I told her it meant more than she knew. And it did, because for so long, I had believed my voice only created distance. Hearing her say it had mattered made something inside me loosen. Later that week, My phone rang again. I almost let it go to voicemail out of pure reflex. But then I saw the name. Mom. I answered with a quiet hello. She hesitated before speaking, and for once there was no background noise behind her. No dishes, no laughter, just her voice, soft and measured, like she had stepped into a different room to talk. She said she had watched my speech again. I really watched it. She said she had cried through most of it, not because she was upset at me, but because she finally understood how long I had been trying to say these things. She said she was sorry she had not asked more questions when I came home, excited about my work. Sorry she had not been braver in standing up to Dad when she knew he was too. Harsh. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. You deserve an apology, sweetheart, truly. But your dad is not ready. He is too wrapped up in how things look right now. I wish he knew how to untangle himself from that. I hope he will, eventually. I closed my eyes. I knew her words were careful, maybe even rehearsed, but they were honest. And honesty in our family had been rare for a long time. I thanked her. We talked for several more minutes. Not about the past, but about small things. Gentle things. It felt like a tiny bridge forming between us, one that might be fragile, but was still real. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Snow had started falling again, soft spirals drifting past the glass. I watched them, feeling a calm I had not felt in years. The next day, I finally called a therapist whose number I had saved months ago but never used. Her voice was warm, steady, a place to land. We scheduled a session, then another. I found myself talking about things I had not said out loud in years. The pressure in my chest that had been there since childhood started to lift, bit by bit. Healing was not dramatic. It was slow. It was steady. It was private. And it was mine. Days passed like that. Quiet mornings, thoughtful conversations, long walks in the cold with my scarf pulled tight around my neck. A kind of freedom began to settle into my bones. The kind that did not depend on anyone else's approval. One morning, I woke to a bright shaft of sunlight cutting across the room. The snow outside sparkled like a layer of crushed diamonds. My phone lit with a new email notification. I tapped it open. The subject line read, "Invitation to speak." The message came from Women in Tech Oregon, a statewide organization I had followed for years, but never imagined I would hear from directly. The email was short and warm. China, we would be honored if you joined us as a guest speaker at our upcoming conference. Your voice represents exactly the strength and clarity we want to highlight. I stared at the words, letting them sink in. A quiet realization crept over me. This was not a doorway someone else had opened for me. This was a doorway I had walked toward on my own, step by step, without waiting for my family to validate a single thing. I felt something expand in my chest, like breath filling a space that had been empty for too long. I stood by the window and watched the snow falling again. Softer now, drifting in lazy circles. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for Dad's approval, or anyone's. I was simply moving forward. Snow was still resting on the branches outside my window when I opened my eyes the next morning. The light had that soft, bluish tint that comes right before the sun pushes through. And for a moment, I stayed there under the covers, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the faint creak of the old radiator warming the apartment. It felt peaceful in a way I had not known in a long time. Not empty, not numb. Just peaceful. When I finally swung my legs over the side of the bed, I saw the little blinking light on my phone. Another voicemail. I did not have to look to know who it was from. Something inside me braced for impact. But the feeling passed quickly. I had been knocked sideways by his words so many times in my life that I almost did not recognize the new steadiness in my own chest. I picked up the phone, sat at my kitchen table, and pressed play. Dad's voice started in its usual gruff tone, but there was a strange hesitation in it. He said he had been thinking. He said he had talked to a few people. He said he did not understand everything I had said, or why it mattered so much to me, but he was willing to talk. He paused, then added something I was not expecting at all. If you want to talk, he said, I will try. I cannot promise I will understand everything, but I will try." There was no command in his voice this time. No anger. No frame of how things should be. Just a man who sounded tired, older than I remembered, and unsure. The voicemail lasted almost a full minute, longer than any message he had left in years. At the end, his voice softened even more. "Call me if you want to." That was it. I sat there with the phone in my hand long after the message stopped playing. I listened again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to understand how I felt hearing it. There was no sharp sting in my chest this time, no trembling in my hands, no old panic rising like thick smoke, just calm. I stood and walked to the sliding glass door that led to my small balcony. I unlocked it and stepped outside. The cold hit my cheeks instantly, that crisp Oregon morning sting that wakes you up faster than coffee ever could. Tiny flakes drifted from the sky, falling slow and lazy, like they had all the time in the world. I leaned on the railing, phone still in my hand, and let the cold settle into my lungs. I thought about all the times I had run toward Dad's voice, desperate to fix things, desperate to earn something that never really came. I thought about every Christmas I had dressed up and baked pies and pretended. We were the kind of family that talked through things. Maybe we could be something closer to that one day. But not yet. Not by me rushing back. Not by me abandoning the boundary I had finally found the strength to draw. I sat on the small bench by the railing and played the message one more time. This time, I heard something quieter, something subtle. He was no longer speaking like a man who expected obedience. He was speaking like someone afraid of losing a connection he had taken for granted. That mattered, but it was not enough for me to hand him the same version of myself he had always been comfortable with. I looked out over the snow-covered parking lot, the rooftops beyond it, the pale sky above. Then I opened a new text message to him. I typed slowly, choosing every word with intention. "Dad, I heard your message. I appreciate it. I need some time. I will reach out when I am ready." I stared at the screen for a long moment. It was the simplest text I had ever sent him, and somehow the strongest. Then I pressed send. A soft breath left me, like I had been holding something in for years, and finally let it go. Not anger, not resentment, just release. I went back inside, closed the sliding door behind me, and felt the warmth of the apartment wash over me. My desk was still covered with notes for the talk I had been preparing for. Women in Tech, Oregon. My laptop sat open, waiting. My favorite pen lay across my notebook, right where I left it. I walked over and sat down. The blank page stared back at me, but instead of feeling pressure the way I used to, I felt a quiet kind of excitement. A steady pulse of purpose, not urgency. When I picked up the pen, my hand did not shake. My outline for the talk included things I'd always wanted to say, but had never believed anyone wanted to hear. The importance of speaking up, even when your voice shakes. The cost of being raised to shrink yourself. The courage it takes to walk away from old patterns when they have shaped your life. Whole life. As I began writing, the words came easier than expected, like they had been sitting in the back of my mind, waiting for this exact moment. I wrote about the little girl I had once been, the one who lined up test tubes on the kitchen table. I wrote about being told I was too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. I wrote about silencing myself to make room for other people's comfort. And then I wrote about the night everything shifted. The moment I stood on stage under bright lights and finally said the truth out, loud. Halfway through a paragraph, I paused and let the pen hover in the air. It hit me how far I had come. Not in my career, not in the number of views or invitations or recognition. In my heart. For the first time since childhood, I felt steady in myself, not reaching for anyone else's approval, not shrinking to fit a familiar mold, just me. The phone buzzed gently beside me. This time, it was a text from Emma, a picture of her standing outside with a cup of coffee, snow on her coat, a little smile on her face. She had typed, "Proud of you today, and always." I smiled. A small, warm smile that spread through my chest like sunlight. I set the phone aside and returned to my notes. My handwriting moved across the page, one line after another, until the draft of my talk began to take shape. It felt like laying bricks for a foundation I had never been allowed to build before. Outside the window, snow kept falling in soft, white circles. A few children from the building next door ran across the sidewalk, bundled in scarves and puffy coats, their laughter rising up faintly. Life is moving on. Life is moving forward. I closed my notebook gently and rested my hand on it. A feeling of peace settled over me, deep and quiet. The kind of peace that does not ask permission. The kind that comes when you stop fighting to be understood and start choosing to understand yourself. I thought of the voicemail again, of the little tremor in Dad's voice, of the years it took to get here, of the boundary I had finally drawn. This was not revenge. It never had been. This was healing. This was self-respect. This was choosing to stop bleeding just because someone else was comfortable with the cut. I stood and walked to the window, watching the snowflakes drift and settle. The city below looked calm, like it was exhaling with me. But I was no longer broken in the ways I used to be. That was enough. As I turned off the lamp on my desk, I thought about the women who would hear my story at the upcoming event. Women who had been told they were too much or too little. Women who had spent years carrying silence like a stone in their chest. Women who were ready to hear the truth in themselves, even if their families were not. I felt grateful to speak to them, to stand in a room where my voice did not have to fight to be heard. And maybe that was the real ending. Or the beginning. I took a slow breath, letting the quiet wrap around me again like a soft blanket. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.